Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on bringing expense and revenue visibility to your MEDITECH GL data with the DI General Ledger Advisor. I'm Frank Smetana from DI's product marketing team. I'll be delivering the presentation along with Dan Jablonski from DI's consulting group, who will then take your questions. As you watch the webinar, feel free to type your questions into the GoToWebinar console on the right side of your screen. If we run out of time for all of the questions, we will follow up with you by email. In this webinar, we'll show you how DI's GL Advisor lets managers and analysts quickly access the transactional data behind general ledger journal entries and helps them analyze critical cost and revenue information to improve expense management and organizational profitability. We built the GL Advisor in response to the challenges our customers were confronting trying to get data out of their MEDITECH general ledger and then tying those ledger entries to their underlying transactional data. That transactional data typically resides in several different MEDITECH modules like accounts payable, payroll, and material management. To tie all of this information together required a lot of assistance from IT, and it typically took weeks to fill those requests. So by then the information was stale and not that useful. Our customers also told us that it was difficult to identify where in the organization cost overruns and excessive budget variance originated. The DI GL Advisor presents useful displays of financial information to users at all levels of your organization via interactive dashboards. GL data is applicable well beyond the realm of finance, and GL Advisor lets non-finance users work with this data in ways appropriate to their job role. GL Advisor presents the data from multiple angles, including financial reports, trends over time, how individuals are doing against each other, and how metrics are doing on a unit basis. GL Advisor provides fast self-service reporting. GL Advisor has answers to the next question readily available to you. Finally, by being able to perform comparisons quickly in GL Advisor, managers and analysts can easily uncover the source of cost overruns and budget variance. So how does GL Advisor help? Well, we help you pinpoint and understand budget variance and cost overruns. You can get down to the individual underlying transactions linked to those costs. GL Advisor presents your raw GL data in the proper context using something called divisors so that your comparisons are really apples to apples. Better insight into costs helps you minimize budget variance, which helps improve cash flow, profitability, and accountability. So who in your organization is going to use GL Advisor? First, upper management and your finance team are using GL data every day. They want to see their corporate financial reports. They're focused on the bottom line, but they also want to quickly see if anything problematic is going on that they need to react to. They want to see who in the organization is responsible for certain numbers coming in as they are. As we move out away from finance, there's still a lot of use for this information from vice presidents, directors, and department heads. All are held to account based on financial metrics. Directors are not looking so much at the bottom line on their report. They're looking at how they're doing against budget or forecast. They also want to take a look at their direct reports and see who is causing the problems on out-of-range numbers. These people are focused by and large on their own domain. They need to see the people under them, and they need to see the expenses that are leading to their performance because that's what they're being grilled on. When we get down to the department manager, there's no direct reports to worry about. These people need to see their view of the numbers, and they need to be able to get at the underlying transactions behind their numbers. They need to be able to answer their boss's questions as to why expenses are so high. So I'm going to log in to GL Advisor as a couple different users so you can see what the system looks like depending on the level the user is logged in as. So first I'm going to log in as a high-level user, the CEO, and these are the menu options available to them. A couple things we can do at this high level. We can create financial reports with layouts that match your existing reports. You can view balance sheets and income statements. And you can view all these over a number of different time periods, rolling, fiscal, calendar, whatever works for you. And GL Advisor helps you benchmark organizational performance against budgets and forecasts, which can be in MEDITECH or other systems, including Excel spreadsheets. You can incorporate current relevant forecast data for comparisons. And you can set variance alerts based on user-selected thresholds. So let's get back to the application here. We're logged in as the CEO, and here I have access to several different functions. The first one I'll show is the Department P&L report. This is your basic income statement view. I'm logged in as a high-level user, so I should have a pretty high-level report. We have the ability to show this at a summarized level or a detailed level. When I log in as a CEO, the default view is appropriately set to hide detail. I can choose any month from the last few years to run this report for. And I can filter it along my department hierarchy or any hierarchy that I have building up off the accounts. So here I have a company with 21 vice presidents. I could run it for any one of them or any of the 87 directors sitting under those vice presidents or any of the number of departments that report to those directors. So there's a lot of different ways I could filter this. Maybe I want to filter this and look at a particular director. But which one do I want to click on? What I really want to do is click on the one that's causing excessive budget variance. And I can't tell from this pull down or from this report which director I want to look at. So this is not the right place to start analysis. This financial report is really an end point of an analysis that you're going to do to understand what's driving the business. So let's back away from this for just a moment. I'm going to head over to the Comparison tab. The idea here is we're going to take some of the key numbers from that financial report that you just saw. If you look at the columns going across the top, 5 of the key lines from that report are presented as columns here. And we could look at those numbers for every vice president. We could see not only what are the numbers for each VP, but we could look at them compared against each other. And right now, that comparison is driven by this pull-down menu. It's set to budget, but we can change that. We can look at it by budget, which is fixed. We can look at it by flex budget, which is volume adjusted over the course of the year. None of these menu choices are hard-coded. It's your budget, your forecast, your plans, anything that you want to load into GL Advisor to facilitate comparisons. And right now, we see that the threshold percentage is set to 10, which means that an arrow appears next to a number if it is more than 10% off of budget, either up or down. And you can see this is kind of busy. There's a lot of arrows there. So if I want only the really big stuff to stand out, I could set the threshold percent to 25. And now only the rows that are way off budget one way or another will appear with an arrow next to them. So let's talk a little bit about comparisons. What can I do with these numbers? I can find a number I'm interested in and click on it. So I click on a cell here, and the click action brings up a menu of options. The first thing I might want to do is get a 24-month trend because that number is meaningless without some context. Is it a blip? Is there a trend happening for a while, or is it just completely normal? So we select trend and up pops the trend, and we can take a look at how that's been going. See, it's been relatively stable, but in a little bit of an uptick so far this year. So this is a visual representation of what's going on. Note also that that click action was sensitive to the cell in which I clicked, not just the row, but the column as well. So if I click on a supplies number, I get back a supplies graph. If I click on other expenses, I get back a chart showing other expenses. So GL Advisor is sensitive to where it is you're clicking on that dashboard or report. Let's assume I'm interested in this vice president, Edgar Clark. I want to see what's driving the numbers and what the directors underneath him are doing. So we'll take it one level deep here by clicking on Edgar. So these are the directors that report to Edgar Clark. If I click again, I'm going to see the departments underneath that director. If I'm interested in Jason Ortiz here, instead of clicking through all the different combinations using the pull-down menus, I can bring up the metric detail directly off the click action. The metric detail provides you with a concise view of the data. What are the numbers for the month, and what are the numbers here today? You see we have some red arrows here for the month, but year to date it's been okay. So at any point I can click back to see the responsibility report. So now I've gone through some analysis in my comparison screens. I've found someone I want to learn more about, and now GL Advisor takes me to the report for that individual. So that's the comparison tab. Now we can see that Edgar Clark here spent $10 million on salaries and benefits, while Curtis spent only $2.9 million. So those are the actual raw numbers. The arrows you see next to each number tell you whether they're up or down against their comparison. But I need some context for those numbers. There could be all kinds of good reasons why Edgar's salaries and benefits are nearly 3 times greater than Curtis's, such as Edgar's having 3 times Curtis's headcount. We need to make an apples-to-apples comparison out of this. So how do we do that? Well, we place numbers into context using something called divisors. Divisors help us place raw values into context. Common sense dictates that increased expenses are expected when volume increases. And what divisors do is they create expense per volume numbers, which are generally more stable to look at. And those divisors, as you'll see in a minute, are completely configurable by anything that makes sense to your organization. This tab looks pretty similar to the P&L responsibility reports, except that we have a 7th column called divisor amount. And the idea with the divisor is we want to look at those numbers on a per unit basis, because I might have $3 million in expenses this month, $4 million next month, but if we did a 50% increase in business, that would actually be pretty good. So by presenting these numbers within the context of a divisor, we get a more stable number to look at. Here we're looking at everything on a per unit of service basis. The unit of service is simply a measure of how much work or billable work the department did that month. We can have several different divisors in here. Another one we like to use is productive hours, if that information is available to your organization. Now we're looking at revenue, salaries, and income per productive hours. You can define any divisors that make sense to your organization and load them into GL Advisor. From the Divisor Analysis tab, we can also look at our 24-month trend, now in the context of the selected divisor. So let's look at Lois Peters. And we see she's got a high number here, and we see that the 24-month trend is definitely drifting higher. And I can click and see the directors underneath Lois. I can also see what's behind that divisor. Let's take Angela Compton here. The divisor is driven by regular labor hours, of which we have 3,886, which is actually down relative to her budgeted value of 5,049. So being high on a per unit basis in this case may be because Angela didn't use as much labor as other people were using or as she was budgeted to use. We can also get to that responsibility report, this time adjusted by the divisor, where we get the actual raw numbers and the actual per divisor numbers. Let's switch gears here and talk about trend reports. This is a comprehensive trend report. For all the different lines that could appear on this VP's responsibility report, I see them broken down into this year's actuals, last year, variance, and percent variance. I can change the compare against pull down to look at budget instead in that second line within each revenue category. So we'll toggle over budget. So now the variance is adjusted against budget. This lets me get a sense of how this is trending over time in a numeric rather than a graphic format. And I can look at this on a fiscal year basis, calendar basis, or rolling 12-month basis. Next, I'm going to log in as Ashley Brewer, who happens to be the director of the radiology department. And what you see here is a more limited set of menu options. As a director, we want to be focused on where we're at, and we want to get into some of the details behind what's driving our numbers, because we're getting hit from above on why we're not making a particular number. I've got a more limited tab selection. I have my department P&L. That lets me see just my numbers. You'll notice that we now have a lot fewer pull-down menus. I have 11 departments underneath me, but that's all I get to see, so I'm restricted to the information that's strictly within my domain. I can take a look at Divisor Analysis. I can do the same kind of analysis, compare individuals against one another, see where my high salary expenses are coming from, see who's up, who's down, and who's doing well against one another. And if I want to see just the raw numbers, I can say no divisor. And that will get me back to the actual raw numbers. I can also look at underlying transactions. The CEO could have done this as well, but C-level people are only going to go so deep into the data. Someone interested in looking at the underlying transactions is probably going to be at the lower levels of the organizational hierarchy. So let's say I want to look at the radiology department's medical and surgical expense costs for this month. Click Action menu brings up both the 24-month trend and GL transaction options, which are going to be the same as you saw before. Now, let's talk a little bit about accessing transactional details. A key part of what makes GL Advisor so useful is the ability to access data from any MEDITECH module, not just the GL. No matter where your data exploration takes you, you don't have to worry about where the transactional source data resides. So you get an integrated view of your MEDITECH GL and materials management, accounts payable, and payroll data, and any other modules that you find relevant. You can access transactional data for detailed drill downs, all the way down to invoice or PO level. And we give you a direct connection to the MEDITECH database, so this data, regardless of how many records you're bringing back, is going to be really, really fast. We can click on a supply account. Transaction types will generally be MM or AP. We can analyze 3 different types of MEDITECH transactions. We can look at materials management, purchase order transactions, period end materials management stats at a summary level, and in this demo, accounts payable at an invoice level. On any of these, we can click through to get more detail from either one of those source systems. For example, we can click on the first PO on the list, in this case the $1,400 PO from Albus Radiology Equipment. The PO level detail for any GL transaction is available simply by clicking on it. So here we see the line items that comprise this particular PO. Here we get a view of what materials this department acquired from hospital stores this month, including quantities and costs. And we can shift gears and understand payroll detail the same way. So starting back on the PL report, let's go look at payroll. We'll dive into salaries, which are backed by payroll. Since payroll transactions are different, GL Advisor provides us with a slightly different view. And you can analyze payroll data down to the employee level. To see payroll information for any employee, we click on that employee, and then we get pay stub level detail for that person. Another powerful feature that we have in GL Advisor is ad hoc analysis via the NetDiver client. You can explore your GL and ancillary data sources without any restrictions, starting from any data dimension. The console on the right side shows all the data dimensions currently available, organized by data models. The down arrows indicate that I can dive into any one of those dimensions to see the values that are associated with a particular row in that dimension. Let's say I need to look at transactional data under a particular account in my materials management system. So I click over here on accounts. GL Advisor displays a list of accounts. Let's say I want to know what's going on with medical surgical supplies. has a rather large amount and quantity associated with it. So I'll click on that account. And now I can dive into any one of the data dimensions associated with that account number. If I clicked on item, and now get a table listing all of the items charged to that account. Notice that the totals are listed at the top, and these totals are identical to the summary row we saw on the previous screen. I can sort from high to low and immediately see where my big expenses are. Looks like we're spending a lot of money on isolation gowns. So I think I've demonstrated some of the functionality that shows how GL Advisor gives you visibility into your expense and revenue data, so I'd like to do a quick recap at this point. The central theme is this notion of self-service information delivery. The idea that GL Advisor gives you faster time to your GL information. You have an intuitive browser-based interface. You can access this anywhere you have an internet connection. Navigation is context sensitive, so you always know what information you were looking at. Very little, if any, training is required. You can always download data to a PDF file or Excel spreadsheet wherever you're at. Secure, role-based displays of information. You can't get information that you're not authorized to see. And you've got a mix of numbers and graphics to help provide context for the numbers you're looking at. You get an integrated view of your MEDITECH data, regardless of which module that data resides in. Divisors provide context for the underlying data, so we're really doing an apples-to-apples comparison. We can view financial statements in your existing familiar formats. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when you bring GL Advisor in-house. And we can easily compare peers, departments, and facilities against one another. We can understand and visualize trends. We can benchmark performance against budgets, forecasts, or any metric that you currently use. And ad hoc analysis lets you go beyond reporting to get at what's driving your numbers. With that, I want to thank you for your interest in the DI General Ledger Advisor. Thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we've given you some idea of the functionality and capability of the GL Advisor and how it might help bring expense and revenue visibility to your organization. And if you have any further questions, please visit our website or give us a call at these numbers. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who will take your questions. And like I said at the beginning, if there's anything that we don't have time for today, Dan will follow up with you in the next couple days with an emailed response.
Okay, thank you, Frank. My name is Dan Jablonski. I'm one of the developers of the GL Advisor. Give me just a moment to get over to the questions, and I'll answer any that appear to be of general interest here. If I don't answer your question here on the call, I will provide a written answer in a follow-up email. First up here, Paul asks, does the GL Advisor work with magic systems? That's a good question for the group. I didn't get into specifics on that. The GL Advisor actually includes a connect utility that extracts data directly from the MEDITECH NPR database. This works on both Magic and client server and produces the same set of GL extracts from both. So the application works against both Magic and client server. Client server produces a little bit better payroll data, but for GL, AP, and materials, the data we require is equivalent from either system. Next up, do I need to purchase your BI application in order to use the GL Advisor? And the answer to that is a clear no. While GL Advisor is built on the technology in the Divisor solution, which is DI's BI offering, it is licensed separately and differently as a turnkey application. So you don't need to purchase the BI product licenses in order to use the GL Advisor. Of course, once we see it, you'll think you want to, but that's a different story. Let's see. Next up here, Susan asks, does GL Advisor let you create budgets and/or forecasts? The GL Advisor is designed to augment your existing investment in your existing systems and bring the data from your GL budgeting planning systems together in a coherent view. If you have a non-MEDITECH budgeting system in place, we can integrate the data from that as well. but it's all about providing visibility and understanding to the data you already have in MEDITECH and potentially in other systems as well. So it's not built to allow the creation of budgets and forecasts. And we'll take one more here, which is, what is the implementation time frame? Another good one. So our generic answer to that is that we can implement the base GL Advisor in 1 to 2 weeks of real time, spread over about a month of calendar time. And that time increases with the number of ancillary systems that need to be mapped in. But because our MEDITECH extracts are already developed and tested, MEDITECH installs tend to be at the low end of that, even with the additional data for AP, materials, payroll. Once we've pulled the data out of MEDITECH, we normally have initial numbers ready for your review in a couple of days, and we'll then go through a validation phase, make sure our reports are accurately presenting all the lines and times you need. We'll configure the organizational structure based on your component dictionary, and we'll set up the divisors. The biggest variable on this is clearly validation, and that's why we extend the calendar time estimate beyond the real time. So let's see. Yeah, I think that'll be it for the live Q&A here. Again, if I didn't answer your question here, I will answer it in a follow-up email. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending and for your interest in the DIGL Advisor, and have a good afternoon. Thanks.